Recording? Okay. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the regular meeting for May 17th, 2023 of the San Mateo County Harbor District Board of Harbor Commissioners order. Can we have a roll call, please?
President Radke.
Present.
Commissioner Mateusz.
Present.
Commissioner Jane Carlin. Present. Commissioner Slater Carter. Here. Commissioner Thomas.
Present.
And now we have public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public that wish to speak to the commission on matters that are not on the agenda. Do we have any hands raised?
We do not.
Okay, move along then. Commissioner comments. George, let's start with you. Any comments?
Any comments? You took me by surprise. Just I thought about the harbor and the commission when I was on a small vacation, just got back from New Jersey. And in addition to a lot of family things, we spent a few days along the coast of New Jersey. And I'm looking at, all of the coastal engineering structures that were built there and jetties and breakwaters. And so, a lot of those structures along the East Coast have been in place since the 1800s. And there's been a lot of experimentation. There's a thing called the New Jerseyization of the shoreline, which was not a good thing. But those were structures that were built that they didn't really realize some of the impacts of that, which now we do realize, how those impacts happen, and we can modify these groin systems, specifically what I'm talking about. There ended up being a groin every 2 blocks as far as the eye could see either way, because one groin would cause an issue and they'd have to build another one and then build another one, build another one. We've done a lot of research in the last 30, 40 years on those kinds of structures. So it was just thinking of the harbor and thinking of you guys, and good to be here.
Commissioner Mateusz.
I'm silent this time.
You have nothing to say. Okay. Commissioner Chen Crowley.
Yeah, so I understand that the Mavericks Festival, or the Mavericks Awards happened on April 29th, which I unfortunately wasn't here for, but I heard it was a great success. So looking forward to seeing if we're going to be able to host the Mavericks Festival again this year. And if hosts are going to come back to that. Well, that I was in Baltimore, and I'll notice these fireboats and stuff in the water and the Chesapeake Bay and the Baltimore Harbor. So it was just interesting, because I just think that what we do to protect our important, and it was that fireboat in the Baltimore Harbor. It was just a good reminder, about the public service that we provide. That's all I have.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioner Slater Carter.
I've been got some very strong and congratulatory comments on the new trail. So good job you guys all did, and
Comments. I have not taken any trips so far flung,
Not yet.
but I did have the opportunity on Earth Day to participate with the VIP tour of the Pacific Beach Coalition, giving a tour of the activities that they do both along the beach and upstream in valleys, which I was very impressed with. And they must have had probably a total of 500 volunteers that day. So it's very, very, very impressive. The other comment I'd like to make too, if anybody is on the phone, or listening in here that is interested in item number 4 of the discussion. This is the approval form of the berth mooring and anchorage agreements. We've decided that we will pull that off and discuss it at a later date. So it will not be discussed today. The F4,
Yeah.
F4.
Under discussion. Thank you. So we're not.
We will not be discussing that today. Okay. We'll move along now to the activities report. Probably the most efficient thing to do is just let general manager and operations give a synopsis of that, and we'll have questions from the commission, from the public comments, and then questions from the commissioners. So, Mr. Pruitt, would you like to start it off?
I don't have any additional comments for the public, with the exception of one. I did call or speak with the Army Corps this morning. They're moving forward on the 111 cap study for the harbor, and a rough draft for our review should be coming out next month. So that's great news that it's moving forward. And I'm working on setting up a tour for them early June before the report comes out, so they can do everything in person and making sure it lines up with what they say in their reports. So very excited about that. We do have to fix something real quick. Microphones are not picking up Commissioner Chen Karali. So we need to move a microphone from John over to theirs. And
It's on the end of the table.
when you speak, if you can go to the podium so the microphone will work. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Moran.
I don't have a whole lot. Fortunately, everything's going quite well at both harbors. At Oyster Point Marina, we'll mention that under the leadership of James Smith, the harbor master, and the assistant harbor master, Jacob Walding, the current occupancy level is 86%, which is for last month, which is the highest that it's been in decades. It's quite remarkable. And the team there is continuing to do an excellent job at recovery from the storms. They've been continuing to clean up and do improvements as well, as they have at Pillar Point as well, under Harbor Master Tibby and Assistant Harbor Master Dante Madrigal. Then Dante led the charge in actually constructing, designing new signage. Was able to work with NOAA to get the actual templates for the signage, but constructed the entire frame and everything by his own design, with the help, of course, of staff. So there's more educational signage at the launch ramp than there has been in the past. In addition to all their efforts with again, warm cleanup still, and additional improvements, just as they always do. Dock repairs, etc. Nothing else really. Any questions?
Yes, sir. Just a quick question, John. I did hear from Brad Damitz about 3 weeks ago. He contacted me first. I suggested he talk with you and with Jim as a status of that contract. So was he able to contact you? He sort of indicated that there was movement in a positive direction.
Are you talking about for Surfers Beach?
Surfers Beach. And so, did you get any words from him? Or?
Yes, we've been in discussion, and he did indicate that there had been some positive movement, but nothing has been confirmed at present.
Right. So
It'd be great if we could get the eelgrass mitigation portion of the project moving along. Those efforts seem to have been stalled, however, and it's looking more like, again, it'll be next season, regretfully. He's still continuing his efforts, though. Anything else?
Administration. Anything on the administration and finance sector? Is Julie?
Julie's online.
Oh, Julie, there you are.
Hi, good afternoon, President Zemke, commissioners. There's nothing really out of the ordinary. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear my?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Nothing out of the ordinary. We continue to do and improve the record retention. We are close in getting all of the HR files in electronic format as part of our ERP system. I am in Sacramento. On my way home today, I had a really good meeting with the CSDA and SDRMA, learning about all the legislation that's coming down the pike, and I can update you on that on our next meeting. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, do we have any members of the public that would like to comment on the activity reports? No hands raised. Okay, I'll open up to questions and comments from the commission. Any other comments or questions on the activities report? Okay, we can move along to the consent calendar. Are there any items that we wish to have pulled from the consent calendar?
Yes.
Commissioner Chen Crowley.
Item 6, I'd like to pull.
Number 6, okay. Any other items? Okay, we will pull item number 6 and place that after item number 5 on the discussion calendar, just before the closed session.
Did you call for public comment on this yet?
Oh, okay, we should call. Okay, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on any of the consent items?
No public
Okay, no public comments. Can we, I would entertain a motion then.
So moved to approve the consent calendar minus item 6.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We approve the consent calendar except for item number 6. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Mateusz?
Aye.
Commissioner Chen Crowley?
Aye.
Commissioner Slater Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner Donrat?
Yes.
President Zemke?
Aye. Okay, moving along to discussion. The first item is One Shore line presentation. Mr. Butch, you want to lead that off?
Thank you, President Zemke, commissioners. A few weeks back, we received a brief from One Shoreline, which is also the flood resiliency district for San Mateo County. On the issue or the report from Pillar Point Harbor Shoreline Area Protection and Enhancement District. So they're looking at just the shoreline around, in and around Pillar Point Harbor. And we asked them to come and make a presentation to the whole board, which is the same presentation we received. I think it's very informative, and I think there's a need for the board to be aware of what other things are going on out there. Mr. Bob Bartalio is working with One Shoreline as their contractor in development of this study, and he'll be making that presentation. Hopefully Len Matterman will be able to make it here before the end of the presentation if there's any questions. So I'm sure he's stuck in traffic.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
I got a text from them saying he is on his way and stuff like that.
We can move the presentation.
Just to kind of
We
move.
can move it. if you
Let's
want.
postpone that. Wait till he comes. Right now to item number 2, the San Mateo Resources Conservation District, Pillar Point Harbor Water Quality Update presentation. Mr. Pruitt.
President Zemke again, thank you. We have Noah Katz on the screen there, and he'll be making a presentation to the board requesting additional funding to carry on their work that they do on behalf of the San Mateo County Harbor District. They're asking for funding of $130,000, not to exceed $130,000 over the next 2 years. And they do, you'll see through their slide showed presentation today, they are very, very involved with the Harbor District and our response to the TMDL, which is growing to be being more extensive every month that we have to respond to it. And he's also doing a lot of work in response to the TMDL and the improvements that we have to make. So he manages those for us. With that, Noah, we'll turn it over to you, and you can share your screen or we can put it up for you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll share my screen. Are you able to see my presentation?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for having me today. Thanks for the introduction, Jim. Yeah, as Jim mentioned, my name is Noah Katz. I manage the water quality program, the San Mateo Resource Conservation District. And I'll be giving you an overview of work we've done on behalf of the Harbor District over the last year and change, and also a proposal for work that we plan on doing in the next 2 years. And just, yeah, quick overview. I'll go over who we are, Resource Conservation District. I know there are a few commissioners I know, and I think a few I haven't met yet. So I want to make sure that everyone understands who we are and talk about some of those TMDL deliverables Jim mentioned, and some other things that we've done, including some investigation on pollution in Denison Creek, which discharges to the harbor, dye testing of Tenant Row, signage project, our annual community science project First Flush, quick slide on sharing the responsibility, and finally next steps and the budget for the following 2 fiscal years. So we're the San Mateo Resource Conservation District. We're a special district, and we originally established in the late 1930s to help deal with the Dust Bowl. And since then, we've expanded to focus on 5 primary focal areas: water, climate, wildlife, agriculture, and fire resilience and forest health. And essentially, we're a local hub for conservation, helping people help the land. And just to go back to our focal areas, our water program is generally split into water resources and water quality, and I manage our water quality program. So let's get into the TMDL. This map on the right, red line, is the outline of the Pillar Point Harbor and Venice Beach TMDL, and some of the things that we've assisted the Harbor District on. In compliance with this TMDL is we assisted in developing the implementation plan. That's a document that goes to the regional board, says essentially how we're going to comply with the requirements, what we're going to do, and lays out a timeline for those actions. One of the deliverables was to inspect all storm and sewer pipes in the Harbor District, and we've done now all of the storm lines ahead of schedule, and working on the sewer currently. I'll go into detail about that in a moment. We've dye tested the liveaboard boats. We've done Tenant Row dye testing, and then outreach and education through our coastside pet waste outreach and education program. And so here's a map that we put together after we had the sewer lines at Pillar Point Harbor inspected. And there are a number of colors here, and I'll explain what those are. The black and orange lines are gravity mains, which differ from the purple lines, which are force mains, in that gravity mains are a larger diameter and they use gravity to move sewage through the pipes out to the pump station, which is here before it goes and joins GCSD's main lines. And the force mains shown in purple pink here are much narrower and require a pump to get material through them. And our contractor, sorry, got a loud car driving by. Our contractor was able to use a CCTV car, so it's like a little remote control car with a camera on it, to inspect all of the gravity mains last summer. And so that's the black lines are the PVC pipes. These are newer. And the orange lines are the vitrified clay pipes. Those are much older. And we found no issues in the sewer line, which is really great. And we're going to inspect these force mains, hope this month, potentially early June. But really good news, no issues in the sewer infrastructure in Pillar Point Harbor, which is great. And here's an overlay map of the stormwater lines shown in green, and the sewer lines that I showed you. Here is just in orange and pink, and the location of the pump station. And just a little bit of history here. We initially started CCTVing the stormwater lines back in 2017, 2018. And we nearly completed all of them except for this line right here. You can see my cursor. We call this St. Augustine stormwater line. We discovered a large deposit of fats, oils, and grease in there, which is clogging it up and inhibited our inspections. We had a new manhole installed in 2019, I believe, to facilitate cleaning this out. And then in 2020, maybe 2021, excuse me, we re-inspected this, and we did not find any new issues. And back in 2017-18, our our contractors, they basically rate each pipe based on condition. And there were a couple that were rated category 4, which means we should probably take another look at them within about 5 years. And so 5 years passed, and we re-inspect some of those stormwater lines, including this one circled in red. And you can see these images here are actually holes in the stormwater pipe. And that's areas where you could get groundwater inflow during the dry season. And if those pipes are dirty, then you could have bacteria coming out of the stormwater pipe. So next steps for that are to re-inspect those hopefully this month to figure out what the best course of action for repairs are. Most likely to be an injection molding, where they actually inject the new pipe inside of the old pipe. And that'll take care of that. And we hope to have that work done in June, the repairs themselves. And then next steps for inspections are to inspect these force mains shown in this pink color, and then also have our contractor go ahead and inspect and map all of the laterals within tenant row. There's been some confusion about where exactly pipes are there, and we think having a map there would be very helpful, and also be able to see if there's any issues. So those are the next steps for sewer and stormwater lines. We did some dye testing of liveaboard boats, where we went out on 2 different days on B dock and C dock, and knocked on windows and asked people to let me on their boats so I could drop these non-toxic fluorescent dye tablets down flushing down their toilets. And then we monitored the outside of the boats for any kind of fluorescence that might leach out of the holding tank. And we discovered no issues with no leaks. So everything looked good. One thing that I thought was interesting is we could not drop, there was no way to drop a dye tablet for a composting toilet. And that to me told me that there may be a lower risk of pollution from composting toilets. So maybe something to further incentivize on liveaboard boats. And then finally, the Regional Water Quality Control Board did some MST testing. That's microbial source tracking. Essentially allows for a DNA analysis of samples, of water samples, to see which animal markers are present. And they did find some evidence to show that there was a human-associated bacteria near one of the boats. But we did actually dye test that boat specifically and did not find a leak. So some conflicting data there. That MST could have come from other locations. But anyway, a little bit of conflict in the data there, but we're pretty confident with what we found. And to go on to our co-side pet waste and outreach and education program, this is a program that is meant to address pollution from pet waste, bacteria pollution from pet waste, all on the coast side between Pacifica and Half Moon Bay. It's in partnership with the county, the Harbor District, the City of Pacifica, and City of Half Moon Bay. And a number of initiatives here, including cabling local events. We made an inspirational video, the link of which is in the slides that you all have. We won't watch it now, it's a little bit long. Social media cleanups, also partnering with existing cleanup organizations to basically talk to folks about cleaning up pet waste, the importance of that, the link between pet waste and water quality, and to provide pet waste bags and other resources, and social media posts and mailer campaigns. So that's ongoing. Denison Creek. So this is creek discharges, I'm sure as you all know, just north of Capistrano Beach in Princeton, sort of Point Harbor. And last year we had a few calls from members of the public saying that it was the water was black and murky and something was going on there. We wanted to have a look. So we went and did some water quality testing, and we found E. coli levels were moderately high, but nothing really earth-shattering there, higher than we'd like to see, but didn't suggest to me that there was, some really serious like sewage leak or something like that. And similarly, we did not find any evidence of human-associated bacteria. So limited data set. We want to keep an eye on this, and if this happens again, we'll have another look. But so far, no evidence that we have, a really serious problem here in Denison Creek. We dye tested all of the toilets and sinks and floor drains in Catch Joanne's, the bar, and the ice cream shop recently. And you can see this center image. There's a flashlight shining on the fluid coming through the sewer line, and that green color is from the dye tablets. And great news, we did not see anything where it shouldn't be. So everything that went into the sewer stayed in the sewer and did not show up in the stormwater line. And you can see my colleague on the right looking down in the stormwater line, looking for any green dye showing up there. And we also dye tested the new floor drains, the new bathroom behind Catch Joanne's. And great news, those floor drains go to the sewer, not to the stormwater network, which is really great. So if they wash their mats and things down there, they're not going to get fat oils and grease and other contaminants into the stormwater line. So that's a big plus. Some time ago now, the Harbor District requested a new signage to notify the public of bacterial contamination at beaches. And I'm happy to say that we finally have these printed and ready to be put up at each of the 5 beaches that the county does their weekly sampling at. And so this is exactly what they're going to look like. It's a sign, a big metal sign explaining the 3 different flag colors. And so what we'll do is when water quality looks good based on weekly results, we will work with Harbor Patrol to go ahead and put these signs up, these flags up accordingly. So blue for good to go, essentially yellow for some risk, and black flag meaning there's an elevated health risk. And so I think these will be easier to see for the public. They'll be more noticeable than some other signs. And another plus is that this will allow us to celebrate good water quality. So another thing we plan on doing is tallying the number of blue weeks at the end of each year, and that'll be available for reports. So we're calling this the Blue Week Signage Project. And yeah, eventually I'm hoping that the flag changes can actually be managed by volunteers. And so I'm hoping to pass that on to members of the public at some point in the future. And going into First Flush, which is our longest running community science program, it is completely volunteer led. Volunteers go out and collect water samples during the first big rain of the year. And it provides this really important snapshot of kind of once a year, worst case scenario for water quality. Volunteers go out and collect samples from storm drains and creeks before that pollution can enter the coast and the Monterey Bay Marine Sanctuary. And this is important essentially because during the dry season, contaminants build up on land. And when you get that first big rain of the season, all this contaminants can wash down into the ocean. So we're curious what that impact is. And many thanks to our partners, funders. We work with Surfrider Foundation, City of Pacifica, San Mateo County, Harbor District, of course, Sewer Authority Mid-Coast Side, and the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And these here, the map up top are the sites that we sampled for this year in Pillar Point Harbor. And this table at the bottom is what parameters we tested for. So it's fecal indicator bacteria, nitrates, and orthophosphates. Those are macronutrients, which can cause things like algal blooms through eutrophication, heavy metals, copper, lead, and zinc, total suspended solids. And then this year we added pyrethroid pesticides to the program. And pyrethroid pesticides are basically a family of pesticides that use a synthetic chemical that's naturally found in chrysanthemums. And we had a lot of interest from the public asking about pesticides. What we really wanted to do, and I think what people are really interested in, is looking at Roundup. But the test for Roundup is just prohibitively expensive. It's about like $1,000 per test. So we couldn't fit that in our budget this last year, but we're hoping at some point we will be able to. But long story short, we tested for about a dozen different pyrethroid pesticides and none were found in the Pillar Point Harbor sites. That's great news. An overview of our results: fecal indicator bacteria, that's E. coli and Enterococcus, were above recommended ranges at all sites within Pillar Point Harbor. And that is by no means good news. I don't want to minimize it, but that is a little bit what we expect to see with First Flush. As I mentioned, it's the worst day of the year for water quality, that once a year worst case scenario. We do hope to see these numbers go down in the future, but that's what we're seeing for now. And then nutrients, nitrates were above recommended ranges at Vassar only. Orthophosphates were had elevated levels at a number of sites. Copper, we actually saw elevated levels at 3 sites, and zinc and lead were within recommended ranges. And then total suspended solids, which is essentially a measure of how much was a suspended material, how much stuff's floating around in the water column, was within recommended ranges at all sites. And to give you an idea of what high total suspended solids look like, if any of you have seen any of the creeks or rivers here on the coast side this winter, it all kind of looks like bad coffee. That all would have astronomically high TSS, total suspended solids. And then pyrethroid pesticides, as I mentioned, didn't find any of it at these Pillar Point Harbor sites or at Surfers Beach. And this is a graph, First Flush data, historical lead concentrations. I just want to bring your attention to the yellow line, which is Vassar drainage, Vassar Avenue. And you can see between 2017 and 2020, it looks like it went up and up and up. And for the first time, we actually saw lead above water quality objectives. So kind of in, quote unquote, dangerous levels in San Mateo County. And we wanted to see if that was going to be if that's a chronic issue or just kind of a one-off. And the past 2 years in a row, it's been back down below the water quality objective. So we don't think this is a chronic issue, but we wanted to keep an eye on it and make sure. And then wrapping up here, this slide is just to show that with the initial investment from the Harbor District over the last nearly 20 years, we've leveraged an additional investment of nearly $500,000. We're actually not including a large grant that we got through Prop 8, which is actually over $1 million there as well, but a little bit fuzzy there. But anyway, point being that we managed to make Harbor District investments go quite a long way and bring other interested parties into the conversation. And then finally, next steps. So to start with, next steps in the next month or so, we want to inspect those force mains, tenant row, and inspect and repair that one stormwater line this summer, all with the current contract. And then in the next 2 years, so fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25, we want to continue to work on our annual community science program, First Flush, install signage that I mentioned, the Blue Week signage program, manage those website updates, social media posts and flag changes. That's a kind of weekly task. Ongoing assistance with the TMDL. And then we want to be able to respond to emerging issues, investigate unknown sources of pollution, and pursue alternative sources of funding, grants for stormwater capture projects, green infrastructure, other projects that would improve water quality. And finally, continue working on our pet waste outreach and education program. So that is what we're going to do in the next couple of years. And yeah, thank you very much. I can open it up for questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Do we have any public comments? Anybody with a hand raised? Okay.
Ed Lawrence.
Hello, Noah.
Hello, Edo.
Great presentation. Super happy to see the RCD still involved in water quality. I just have a few questions.
Sure.
One is with signage. It's great to see those signs go up because, as you know, it's confusing for the public. One issue that's, I don't know that there's an easy solution for it, but often the creek that's sampled has high indicator bacterial counts, and then just the ocean or harbor, in this case, the harbor water, the counts are low. And so it would be great if there's a way to put a sign by the sampled site and maybe elsewhere where the water is cleaner. Like Surfrider tests the yacht club, county doesn't. And Yacht Club usually is clean, and then Denniston Creek and the Capistrano outfall, those tend to be high. But people get confused when they see the county sign. County sign just, it's not specific. I don't know if you have any ideas about dealing with that, but it would be great to kind of educate the public a little bit about it.
Sure. So there are those blue signs currently, like at Capistrano outfall and St. Augustine outfall. But I think some people say they're not aware of the bacterial problem regardless of those signs. One of the things I'm really interested in, so these signs will hopefully link people to our website. And right now I'm working on a kind of detailed story map that will explain, hopefully in an engaging way, a lot of the science and the way these signs are meant to work. But one of the things I'm really interested in is developing, understanding safe swimming distances from discharges. Yes. So usually those discharges, right? Yeah, like you mentioned, like those creeks will be, they have usually the highest bacteria, and then it'll go into the mixing zone and it'll dissipate. But where exactly is that zone of safety? And so I think long term, I think that's the way to go, is to figure out what those safe swimming distances are and educate people on them, basically. Hope that answers your question.
It did. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment, Ed. Any other hands raised? No.
We have
yes,
one.
Matt Klein.
Okay. Matt, go ahead.
Hi, let's see. Okay. All right. Looks like I'm on there. Yeah, I was very happy to see that you did test the liveaboard vessels and found that there was no leakage from the holding tanks. We have an organization called Liveaboards United, and we'd like to become involved in ensuring that that state of affairs stays, very, very clean, and the vessels are, when they're monitored, clean and are a good benefit to the harbors. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, thank you. Matt, I'll go ahead and drop my email address in the chat if you want to reach out. Love to talk. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
There's no other public.
Okay, no other public comments. Okay, open it up to comments from the commission. Are there any?
Go ahead, George.
No, mine's a more generic comment. If you have something more specific.
I just actually support the work that the RCD has done for us. And I mean, this partnership has been going on for a few years now. And I think it reassures the public that, we're doing what we can to keep our harbor safe and making sure the water's clean. So I'm actually inclined to support this, the proposal not to exceed $130,000 for 2 years, for the next 2 years, fiscal years. I mean, I don't want to make a motion prematurely, but I mean.
Well, I'll second it.
Okay. I mean, we
And
can
then
have
we
the
can discuss it.
discussion. So yeah. So I'll move to move forward with this proposal not to exceed $130,000 for a period of 2 years, fiscal years 2023, 24, and 24, 25, to fund the San Mateo County Resource Conservation District.
Second.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Commissioner Ratouche.
So I liked seeing the summary of what you've leveraged since 2014, but the question came up in my mind, how much has the Harbor District paid you since 2014? So I'd like you to get back to the district with that answer. Obviously, I don't expect it right now. I saw some of the other funding people. Unfortunately, the Harbor District gets beat up for some of these things that don't originate within our property at all. We're a holder in due course of the streams. I was wondering, do you get funding from GCSD? I see you do some of the testing around Oceano. Is Oceano funding you? As Commissioner Giancarelli said, I support the work of the RCD, but a lot of it's OPM. You're working with other people's money. And I'm sure we could find projects to spend money on as well. But I'd just like to see that our money is being spent in a wise method.
Thank you. So just to answer your 3 questions in order, I can tally that up and let you know what the total contribution from Harbor District has been since 2014. GCSD funding, we currently don't receive funding directly from GCSD. We do receive funding from Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side, of which GCSD is a part. In the past, we have received funding for water quality work directly from GCSD. In other work that the RCD does, we do work with GCSD. So we have an agreement with them to provide them essentially natural resources assistance as needed. We do work with them, and I do not currently receive funding from Oceano, and I'm not sure if we have in the past.
Some of your force mains, gravity mains, something is on the other side of the road. It's definitely not Harbor District property.
It's definitely not Harbor District property, and a big part of our work throughout the years with the Harbor District is ensuring that the Harbor District is not a source of pollution, not a source of bacteria, and also making that clear in meetings. Was that yesterday? Jim and I were in a meeting with members of the county and other implementing bodies in the TMDL, and there was a request from the regional board to do a special study, which is an additional, needs to be funded, possibly complex, expensive study looking at where pollution from Capistrano outfalls coming from. And with the data that we've managed to collect, I was able to, definitively say that's not coming from the Harbor District. So I think, yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in finding sources and not wasting time looking for the wrong things. And so I do think that's a value add, certainly. And that comes from the work that we've been able to do through our water quality assistance program with the Harbor District.
See our amended item that we got on F2 lists a lot of items that it seems like the county or other agencies could be funding as well.
I do. Yeah, I think there are opportunities to seek additional funding from other bodies. There has been some throughout our time working with the Harbor District. There's been some back and forth whether the board wanted us to, pursue improvements outside of Harbor District property. For example, outreach and education, or working with equestrian operations in the upper watersheds. Because we went from the understanding that a lot of pollution is coming from outside, or work just on projects that are within Harbor District property and nowhere else. And we're happy to work with you all on what you'd prefer at this time. But yeah, when it comes to pollution coming from other sources outside of the Harbor District, I'm completely agree that we should try to seek funding from those from other sources as well.
Okay,
I have a specific question.
Commissioner Chancarelli.
Sorry. So Noah, thanks for the presentation. Just to kind of piggyback on what Tom said. I actually had a question here because part of what y'all are doing is also this education and outreach. And it just seems like, do you think that we need more of that? Because I agree with Tom, having been involved with funding this and partnering with the RCD, that, I think that the Harbor District work is improving all the time. And a lot of it is thanks to you and the RCD and the work that y'all are doing. But, I can see other agencies still trying to leverage what they think is the current situation and, using it as a hammer rather than, looking at the improvements and the partnerships that we have with you as an agency. So in terms of education and outreach, I mean, how do y'all define that for us?
Sure. So we have through our COSIDE, let me back up. We have our COSIDE pet waste outreach education program, which is in partnership with the City of Pacifica, City of Half Moon Bay, and the county, and they do a cost share of about $50K per year over 3 years. And then the Harbor District is in the budget proposal, essentially $5,000 a year additionally from the Harbor District to augment those outreach and education initiatives. And in terms of if it's needed, I think that generally, land sea connection education is needed to educate people, not only people who live on the coastside, but also people who visit, that what they do on land has water quality impacts downstream. And I do think that it's pet waste focused because one of the TMDL implementation actions is to do outreach for pet waste. And so there's a regulatory compliance need for that work, but there's also, I think, a wider watershed health, water quality education need more generally, as I see it being essentially preventative care for water quality to stop pollution from entering it before it gets there. And then I think you asked specifically, how do I define outreach and education? So what are those initiatives? And that's social media, the strategies of social media, mailers, videos, updating a website to share information, and that kind of thing. I apologize. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Commissioner Carter.
Yes.
Sorry, Catherine. Yes.
I have been reading the county's stormwater permit that was renewed last July. And then wandering around Montera and El Granada, and we have, there's lots of stormwater problems, and it's been documented there's an excellent documentation of the stormwater problems available from the Mid-Coast Community Council. And I'm sure they've been in touch with you, but you might want to contact Greg Diegas to get a hold of what the community has put together. Because this year, both in El Granada, the amount of stormwater pouring out off of the park, Quarry Park, and just from the unpaved roads up higher, I saw stones this big being pushed down the street. And one of the things that the county doesn't do is it doesn't say, nowhere have I seen a sign like I see in Burlingame or San Mateo, this drains to the ocean. Well, they don't drain to the ocean, they drain to the bay, but none of the outfalls from on the coast side say this drains to the ocean.
So people assume it's the harbor's fault.
And the way the tides work, and you might be interested, Montero Water and Sanitary has been working with the a professor at San Francisco State on the surface tide patterns and how they have been changing. It's a project that's been going on for a couple of years. I think it's still going on, but a lot of what gets pushed into the ocean or into the harbor here, maybe not be coming necessarily from the creeks. They maybe are only a little bit of what gets pushed in here from Half Moon Bay or from off the ocean or Pacifica, depending on which way the currents are and the wind is. But again, in seeing who your funders are, I really didn't see much in the way of San Mateo County, and I haven't seen, if San Mateo County had no one at last query in charge of stormwater on the coast. They didn't even think there was a problem. And if you look at what the community under Greg Diegas on Mid-Coast Community Council has done, there's a lot of documentation and photos, and I have photos back from an El Nino in 2005, and I have a few from this year. It's pretty amazing how much runoff there is and how persistent it is. So I appreciate your work. Needless to say, I seconded, as you know, the motion, and I would like to see it going. But I'd like to see it expanded to other agencies who are responsible, because as Tom was saying, it's not the harbor district's responsibility. Our jurisdiction does not go past the high tide line, except to our own district lands.
Well, thank you. I'll certainly reach out to Greg and look for that report. Look forward to reading that. Just to clarify, we do work with the county a lot and do receive a lot of funding from the county. We work a lot with I work a lot with their Office of Sustainability. But I suppose they don't. I'm sure if we did another big study, they would be happy to fund part of that. But yeah, I agree. There could be more sharing the responsibility. One thing I would say, just for clarification, when it comes to fecal indicator bacteria, really people are primarily seeing success with dry season control. Wet season control, on the other hand, the only real strategy that people have is green infrastructure, stormwater management, and there's really no data to show that's having any measurable impact on fecal indicator bacteria concentrations. We just don't know yet. It's new enough that we haven't seen it. And I do think when it comes to making measurable improvements on the number of exceedances at these beaches a year, that dry season flows are the place to focus energies. And still most of those come from outside of the harbor district. And so there's work to be done, across these watersheds. But yeah, I think we can design stormwater management for, a 10-year storm, there'll always be a bigger storm. And really if we're gonna perhaps be successful about controlling fecal indicator bacteria, we need to focus on dry season flows.
Yeah. Thank you, Noah. Commissioner George, go ahead.
Another quick question. Is there any value in knowing after these pollutants leave that source that you're measuring, what happens to it when it gets in the harbor itself? Are there any areas where that material then kind of gets concentrated? Talk about the water portion now. Okay.
Mhm.
The follow-up question is then the interface between these pollutants and the sediment. A lot of those pollutants will attach itself to the silts and clays. And then once it gets in the harbor and we have to dredge it, then does become our concern. So I don't know, it's a question for John and maybe Jim. Do we have a similar program that every once in a while we do sediment sampling throughout the harbor to see where pollutants may be starting to show up?
We do testing with.
That's prior to the
water
dredging?
testing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We do water testing throughout the harbor in different areas, but I don't think we do sediment testing.
Sediment, okay.
You outside of the current project.
So you would have to test your sediments prior to dredging to get
Yes,
a permit, so we do
unless
that
it's
part.
attached to a project.
But to get ahead, we don't really look at, if there's
don't have a
concentrated
routine
sediments
test.
coming out of any of these creeks,
No.
that then we get it there before it gets into any of our channels. We don't do that part. Okay.
Those are really great points, good questions. So a couple of things so if you're looking at a freshwater discharge coming out to the harbor, to the ocean, the shape of that plume, I always imagine that if you see a discharge, it would kind of come out like a sort of like a lollipop, and you'd have this big plume of contamination. Actually, because freshwater is less dense than salt water, it'll float to the top a lot and then be pushed back. It's kind of this like thin band along the beach. So you have your area in the mixing zone of highest contamination there, and then eventually that'll be mixed and most likely incorporate with sand and sediment. And we have actually tested sands at these beaches and did find pretty high fecal indicator bacteria. There's some data to show that when you have a lot of wave energy or rain, it's going to then mix that up, and the sands themselves will act as essentially a source of fecal indicator bacteria in the water column, and that could impact the county's weekly sampling events. And I don't know if, like occasionally getting rid of that sand and replacing it would actually have a measurable impact on fecal indicator bacteria. I'm not sure. But there is some interaction there with what I consider secondary sources of bacteria. So rather than primary sources, which are from the gut biome of warm-blooded animals, secondary sources are things like biofilms that grow on aquatic vegetation, sand, sediment, that kind of thing, that often can have a pretty high bacterial count. And when they're in the water column, it can kick numbers way up temporarily. Hope that answers your.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, we do have a motion to approve the funding of an amount not to exceed $130,000 for 2 years, 23-24 and 24-25. May we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Shane Crowley, aye. Mr. Slater Carter.
Yes.
Mr. Donald.
Aye.
Mr. Duffy.
Aye.
Mr. Tush.
Aye.
Okay. I'm assuming we can go back to item number 1. Okay, good. Jim, want to introduce this item?
Thank you, President Zemke. To repeat, myself and Commissioner Garmer sat down with One Shoreline and received a brief on their study of this Pillar Point Harbor area. And the official title was the Pillar Point Harbor Shoreline Area Protection and Enhancement District. They were looking at how to address sea level rise in the Pillar Point Harbor area. And they did a study, and they're here to brief that study. We have Len Matterman, he's the general manager, like not that title, but he runs One Shoreline as the general manager, and then Bob Bertaglio is a contractor with One Shoreline, and they'll both be briefing. With that, I'll turn it over to Len.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim, and hello, commissioners. It's good to be here. Again, my name is Len Matterman. I am the CEO of San Mateo County Flood and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District. It's a long name. We're also known as One Shoreline to highlight the notion that no jurisdiction can address the climate change challenge alone, and that we're all in this together. So 18 months ago, we asked a consultant team, ESA, the smartest people we know on this topic in this area, to survey the connected climate vulnerabilities of the harbor in Princeton and Miramar and Highway 1 and the beaches, and then develop high-level concepts to address this transformative challenge across jurisdictions through adaptable, aligned, shared protection. So I'm really trying to emphasize that this is not just about the highway or just about the harbor or just about Princeton or just about Miramar or just about recreation or just about the ecology. It's really trying to take a big picture look, a vision of what's happening now and what should we do about it long-term. Next slide, please. Okay, so before the breakwaters were built, and other aspects of development, on the left, you see an image of what the Half Moon Bay so-called log spiral shape looked like. It was uniform and rates of sand, generally speaking, and rates of erosion, also generally speaking, and there was a level of equilibrium about this. Since that time, there's been infrastructure put in place, of course, and what you see is the difference between pre-breakwater, the blue wave trajectory, as opposed to the red wave trajectory, and that caused multiple impacts. In terms of the details of what we're looking at here, I would defer to Commissioner Domerat or the Bob Battaglio, who's with ESA, to speak to those kind of hydrodynamic and sand transport issues. They're much more skilled at that than I am. The result of this is that in some areas there's too much sand, and in some areas there's too little sand. That's the kind of big picture general problem we have, and I think we all agree on that topic. And the result of that is on the next slide. So looking at the current vulnerabilities, we really broke it down to 4 areas, and you see 2 pictures attached to each area associated with those vulnerabilities. On the Princeton shore, development occasionally floods, and there's been a loss of land and beach, of course, and public access due to erosion. And it's led to uncoordinated and unsuccessful efforts to armor the shoreline, and unpermitted largely. Pillar Point Harbor has too much water, flooding in some cases, and of course, too much sand in areas that impedes navigation and the boat launch. Highway 1 and Surfers Beach, pretty well known. Highway 1 is at significant risk. The picture at right under Highway 1 is a recent picture following the storms earlier this year. And of course, there's too little sand, and it impacts Surfers Beach as well. And then Miramar and Marauder Road to the south are also very heavily impacted, as we all know. And these vulnerabilities are getting worse. Next slide, please. To highlight this area on the state level, in August of 2022, there was a study from the Scripps Institute and UC San Diego of erosion rates in the future for all of California's coast, and it identified Pillar Point Harbor area as maybe equal to Vandenberg Air Force Base and only less than Lost Coast up in Humboldt County. Otherwise, huge exposure here to this issue and looking at it at a state level. Next slide, please. Also wanted to highlight for the public and everybody here the governance issues, the challenging governance issues and how complicated they are. This shows, of course, federal assets, Corps of Engineers and Air Force, state assets in the form of Highway 1 and state beaches, county assets, all of the area in yellow is county jurisdiction, and they have assets, and city jurisdiction in purple for the city of Half Moon Bay, and of course, special districts, Harbor District, Granada Community College District, Granada Community Services District, and then all the agencies at the bottom that have an interest in this area as well, or regulatory authority over it. Next slide, please. Also want to highlight that there have been many studies of this issue. This is not something that's unknown. These studies have been done by specific entities, including the Corps of Engineers, the Harbor District has done several studies, the county, and of course, it's been working on something called Plan Princeton for many years. Caltrans has done studies, as well as, again, the Granada Community Services District. So this is not an area for want of information what we tried to do and what we asked ESA to do was pull together that information into kind of a broader view and not just focus in on one aspect of the area that was the subject of a particular study. Next slide, please. Okay, this is perhaps the most important slide because it really just kind of provides an overview of what we were trying to accomplish. Our objectives for this project, this study, were to identify how to sustain the long-term viability of key assets. Those include built assets that are shown in yellow, recreational assets that are shown in purple, and ecological assets. So how do we sustain those for the long term? And the principles that guide us on this study are that there are many jurisdictions, as I just mentioned, and key stakeholders, and there's a shared responsibility for an adaptable solution. And that addresses long-term conditions, not just dealing with today. That's not what this is about. There are many projects to deal with today. Caltrans is going to try to figure out how do they keep the highway running for the next 10 years. There are issues with the harbor district. How do you keep navigation going? Of course. Issues with the coastal trail and Mirada Road, and those are ongoing. Princeton has urgent issues. So this is not about today's urgent issues. This is about the long-term urgent issues. So getting back to the guiding principles, adaptable regional solution for long-term conditions and working with nature rather than fighting it. Many efforts are trying to fight nature that are out there, and we consider those long-term to be more difficult, more expensive, and if they require energy, much more energy intensive because they're becoming more difficult. So this is the big picture of what the study was about. I'm going to turn it over to Bob Battaglio. He's with ESA, and he's been working in this space, so to speak, for a long time, and he'll talk about some of the specific findings of the study. Thank you. And I'll be around to answer questions, of course.
Thanks, Len. Good afternoon, commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you and talk about this vision. Let's see. I think the next slide, please, if you don't mind. Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit on the engineering side and physical processes, and then get into the alternatives or the vision that we have, which is one alternative. So without one shoreline's guiding principles, i.e. under the status quo, what might sea level rise protection look like? Of course, we don't know that answer, but generally we think the breakwaters would have to be adjusted, rebuilt and raised. Now we're talking about year 2100, 6+ feet of sea level rise. We're not talking about right now, we're talking about into the future. So to maintain protection of the berths, we think that the breakwaters would have to be upgraded and other facilities protected and raised. At Princeton, there's an existing problem, and we expect that some sort of shoreline armoring or realignment, some action is needed there. Along Highway 1, there is shoreline armoring that is protecting the roadway, but it seems kind of tenuous. Perhaps needs to be upgraded and will likely extend. The green line shows it extending all the way down to the next stoplight. I mean, or beyond that, farther down, which is likely to happen if we were to predict things without other actions. And then at Miramar and down farther down, even beyond Arroyo Medio, beyond Mirada Lane, there's a severe existing problem I think you're all aware of with the erosion and the threat to the built environment there. And so we expect that there would be armoring or realignment in those locations. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about problem definition. As an engineer, we like to try to define problems before we solve them. And this challenge that we have has multiple problems, but just on the physical sand transport side, which is something I have studied, I wanted to address on the left is the Half Moon Bay littoral cell, and on the right is a diagram of wave reflection using an aerial photograph that's a zoom in at Surfers Beach. So I want to talk about the left image first. The white arrows indicate the sand transport directions in terms of the net transport. the waves come from different directions, the sand moves back and forth, but we think the net transport is generally from north to south. And the normal condition would be the sand would move into the bay, some of it into the hook of the bay where the harbor is, and then move through the system and past Miramani's Point on the south. You can think of the cell as kind of like a bucket that if you add sand, the beach gets wider, and then probably more sand moves out of the south end. If you take sand away where there's less sand supply, the beach gets narrower and then the backshore erodes. So that's the definition of a cell. Now, the white lines with the little circles indicate that the drainages provide sand, in particular Deer Creek, which discharges at the boat launch ramp. And that sand is deposited into the harbor. I think you already know that, but I mean, that's part of the problem. And then there's a little line with a circle from Mavericks Beach in what we call the lagoon between the rocks and the west breakwater. And there is sand that comes across the breakwater into the harbor as well, and probably through the breakwater over there. So basically what happens is the sand that would go down the coast and would go past Surfers Beach is trapped in the harbor. A lot of that sand is trapped in the harbor. So the harbor is a big sand trap right now. The image on the right shows how the waves, solid white lines, as they propagate in to shore, they reflect off the east breakwater, and you get the reflected waves in this image, the dashed white lines, that then cross up and form a nice surfing peak. But they also direct sand transport to the south. So the breakwater results in an increased southward sand transport from Surfers Beach. So Surfers Beach has less sand because it's trapped in the harbor, and a greater rate of southward transport. And that's why it's eroding, and that's why the backshore is eroding. Next slide, please. Thanks for listening to all that, but I just wanted to kind of show my understanding or what my thoughts are of the harbors most to the south. So what are the consequences of continuing the status quo approach? Well, we know there's flooding from these different reports. There's a flood risk in Princeton on the west side. There's erosion that we've talked about south of the harbor, also at Pillar Point. There is a risk with sea level rise due to waves impacting development directly, or erosion and waves along Princeton and along the coast inside the harbor as well as south of the harbor. And there's a general impact to what the Coastal Commission would call coastal resources. And I mentioned surfing just because several of us think that's important. So anyway, next slide, please. So with One Shoreline's guiding principles, what might sea level adaptation look like? So again, we're looking at the year 2100 or 6+ feet of sea level rise. This is a future vision. There's alternative future visions. There's, in a way, this is intended, I think, to start a conversation. There's lots of variants and options and different ways along an adapted pathway to get to this vision or a different one. But this is what we came up with. Number one, the outer breakwaters would be removed. Number two, the west outer breakwater would be rebuilt farther landward. And I'll explain why that seems beneficial, even though it does seem like a big lift. The inner breakwaters would need to be upgraded significantly to handle the ocean exposure. The boat launch ramp would be relocated into the inner harbor. We think that submerged reefs off of Surfers Beach would have multiple benefits, including providing a wave dissipation that would tend to slow down the sand transport and widen the beach locally. Number 6 is kind of an interesting one. I think we all know that there are reefs extending south from Pillar Point, and the navigation channels kind of snake through those. One of the things that will happen as sea level rises is that the depth over those reefs will get deeper. And what that means is that the waves that break on those reefs now will pass over those reefs and approach the shore at a greater height. In other words, there'll be bigger waves coming over the reefs towards the shore. So that's something that no one's really looked at, but it's something to consider as we plan for the future. Number 7, Deer Creek goes into a culvert underneath Highway 1 and then discharges near the boat launch ramp. And every El Nino winter, there's sand that deposits and the boat launch ramp is closed right now. At least it was last time I looked. We hope to dredge that soon. But the idea would be to put the launch ramp in the inner harbor. And Deer Creek could be rerouted either, it could be left where it is or rerouted inland, either through a culvert or along the corridor parcel. There's been talk of, daylighting it down to the shores at Surfers Beach. So the sand goes straight to the beach instead of into the harbor. And then Highway 1 is another factor, another asset that's really important, and that's going to need to be addressed. And in the future, they may need to raise or take other action there, Caltrans being the day. Next slide, please. So I kind of covered some of this as I was going over the prior slide, but this slide was intended to show why these changes would be made. And so I'll just go down the list. So the idea of moving the west breakwater north and landward of the point would be to allow the sand to more easily bypass Pillar Point and not go directly into the harbor and move along the breakwater to where the east breakwater is now. Obviously, the harbor facilities in this vision would be protected, and there's actually some expansion of berth possibility in some places, but we didn't map that out. Wave patterns from this breakwater setup would, we think, allow sand to deposit at Princeton rather than move away. So that makes the adaptation at Princeton a little easier. Deer Creek doesn't impact the boat launch ramp and doesn't shoal the harbor and affect navigation. By changing the sand transport, the beaches would be restored to some degree, depending on how much sea level rise occurs. And then that blue stippled, white and blue area indicates a concept that we came up with. It's kind of a new idea to augment the reefs by placing rock and raising them back up to compensate for sea level rise. So conceptually, if sea level rise went up 6 feet, you might place 6 feet of rock there to knock the waves down, but to provide also the same level of habitat and other activities, and kind of keep the status quo. The headland around the, I guess it's called an Air Force or no, Space Force base now, that area is still expected to erode, as the red line indicates. Next slide. And so one of the ways to address this challenge is with long-term planning, adaptation planning, and one framework within which long-range adaptation planning is within the Coastal Act. And there's 3 major kind of vectors or approaches here. One is the California Coastal Commission itself, which has overall authority, even though that's delegated to the local coastal programs and plans. But they have they have jurisdiction over the areas not covered by the municipalities. There's the Half Moon Bay local coastal plan. Half Moon Bay extends up to Surfers Beach, and they're looking at adaptation now. So that's another opportunity. And then the County of San Mateo covers the unincorporated areas like Princeton, and that's another opportunity. So through these plans, you could, which would engage the public through the development of these plans and engaging the public, regional adaptation plan, which is, what everyone's wrestling with right now, is how to have a regional coastal adaptation plan. This would be one way going through a process that would involve everyone. I think that's our last slide. Thank you. I'm around for discussion, questions. if you want.
Thank you. I will call for comments from the public. Are there any hands raised on this topic?
Yes, Ed Lorenz.
Go ahead.
Hello. Hi, Bob. It's great to see you. I wish I was there. Thank you to One Shoreline and Harbor District for bringing this topic to the meeting. It's nice to finally see the fruits of your efforts, Bob. I have lots of comments on this, and I only got 2 minutes, so I'll try to be quick. One of the concepts that I think is really important is to remember that Pillar Point Harbor is a harbor of refuge, and that last drawing where the jetties had been moved might be a problem for boats coming in on southerly weather, because you wouldn't be able to get in the way that thing is described right now. So I would encourage.
Brent, can you take your foot off the phone?
Sorry.
Oh, your foot's on the phone.
Oh, on that thing. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ed.
Going?
Yes.
Sorry, Ed.
That's okay. I think that should be considered, because if you're a fisherman or a sailor on a boat in southerly weather, you may not even get into San Francisco, but you could, right now anyway, you can pretty much enter Pillar Point Harbor at any time. Another thing is the Half Moon Bay was created by a lot of sand movement over the years, even before the jetties were there, and you have that beautiful arc that's created. And it seems to me that even with the cutouts and the way you've described it, you'd still have to do something to prevent erosion along the new shoreline created by the movement of the breakwater. I'm glad to see all these concepts. And one last thing I'd like to say is I'm excited to see this conversation, and I'm very happy that it was described as a kind of a template for future discussions to see how we'll all adapt to this. Thanks.
You, Ed?
Next we have Kimberly Williams.
Go ahead, Kim.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I came in the middle of the presentation, so I missed some of it, and I apologize for that. I was in the middle of my workday. But I want to say that on behalf of Surfrider, San Mateo County Surfrider, we support exploration of these alternative concepts, and we also encourage the Harbor District to collaborate with One Shoreline and to be more collaborative and seek a more collaborative approach with overlapping jurisdictions and with the community. And I don't think we've seen that so much up to this point. And so thank you to Bob for the presentation. And I think this looks very promising. Bob seemed to indicate that he was saying that some of these changes would enhance surfing. And I would just like to ask him that question more directly about what we know about how it will impact surfing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Do we have any other public comments?
Mark Massaro.
Mark, go ahead.
Good afternoon, commissioners and the consultants. One Shoreline, thank you for the presentation. And I do want to congratulate One Shoreline for their work on the San Francisco Bay side of San Mateo County. I think that there's probably a lot of good reasons for them to be working on that side of the bay. To the extent that your presentation was focused on the San Mateo County Harbor, I think what it was a rather eloquent description of why dredging is so needed along the southernly sandless beaches. And in fact, the Harbor District has now been working for many years to accomplish that. And rather than debating removing, diminishing, or shrinking the size of the harbor, I would just really welcome efforts in support of the current dredging and then continued permanent dredging of the existing harbor. Anything that damages the public harbor would truly have catastrophic public recreation impacts for people swimming and doing stand-up and boating and hiking and fishing and the myriad of recreational uses that the harbor, the one and only Pacific Coast Harbor in San Mateo County, provides for the public. And so rather than, contemplating the dismantling of the harbor, I would urge that One Shoreline, to the extent that they're going to work on the ocean side of San Mateo County, focus on supporting the district's effort to dredge now and in the future, because that would have an impact that appears to be multiple times less expensive than the hundreds of millions of dollars that would be required to carry out the various initiatives that were outlined here today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Are there any other public comments? Okay, I will open it to commissioner comments. Is there a commissioner that would like to?
Okay, let's get going here. No. First of all, I really want to thank One Shoreline, Bob and Len, and especially Len's early comment in the start of his presentation. This is truly a system, and it's a systems approach we got to take. And part of that is not only the engineering system, but it's the system of all the governance that has to go on to make something happen. Great concepts. There's a lot of concepts. There's a lot of things that we can look at. This really established some discussion. And Bob and Len know this. You have that, that the harbor itself is really a part of the solution. We're really not a part of the problem, because the breakwater that causes a lot of the problem is not ours, it's the federal government's. But we're part of the solution in that we have dredged material. It's clean material. There's not a lot of material based on what Mr. Mateo was saying. We have maybe 12,000 to 15,000 cubic yards a year that may be accumulating in that harbor. That's not a lot. I mean, when you look at some of the other harbors along the coast of California, where you're dredging 800 to 1 million cubic yards a year, that's our harbor is almost non-existent in terms of that dredge. So that the material can be placed on the beach. It will help. Every little bit helps, but it's not enough. And the harbor's sediment dredging alone will not solve the problem of the county shorelines. There's got to be a much bigger idea going on here. And in that is that systems approach. So I'd like to make a proposal. I don't know if we need a motion for it or not, but I would like to make a proposal that our maybe ad hoc committee that we have now put together a plan to maybe co-host with One Shoreline a work group. This work group would be made up of Harbor, One Shoreline, maybe other county representatives, but the Corps of Engineers, the Marine Sanctuary, the Coastal Commission. There's a lot of parties that would look at this, and this is solely to look at this section of coastline. If that work group works, then maybe it can get expanded someday in the future for Pacifica. But people may think, well, that's almost non-tenable to pull all that together. And we in the Corps did that in 2000, where we built the Coastal Sediment Management Work Group for the whole state of California. We brought in 20 of these agencies, and they met monthly for 15 years. And they built reports, and it worked. And there was a lot of discussion. A lot of the people thought, just on the sidebar meetings with other state agencies and so forth, that was a lot of good discussion. But this is solely to focus on a lot of these ideas, to start with the technical kind of aspects of it, then we can approach to the political aspects, because it's definitely going to take politics having to deal with this. If you're going to look at sediments on the order of maybe 1 million cubic yards for a year every 5 years, you're going to talk about where's that sediment going to come from? Is it going to come from inside the sanctuary? Big challenge. Maybe it comes from Pacifica and we bring it down. They're not in the sanctuary. A lot of these ideas that amongst the various technical people of the agencies, I think we can get a lot of, cover a lot of ground a lot quicker. So I'm thinking we can co-host it. coming up. I think the Corps is going to be giving its, kind of a first presentation of its draft stuff coming up in the next 2-3 weeks. That may be a good kickoff of bringing together like a work group that can then work together to come up with a solution. So with that introduction, let me get to my 30 questions. Sorry. Go ahead. I'll wait. Some of the other commissioners maybe.
Yes, Commissioner
Thank you.
Slater-Kerr.
I think it's some really interesting ideas. I wish the Harbor District had been included earlier on in this process, but we're here now, so we'll start now. First of all, where's the money coming from? And if we're going to have some kind of commission level participation or whatever from the Harbor District, who are we going to pay to do it? Where are we going to get the money to fund it? Because I don't want us just to be a byline on this. I've watched this whole eelgrass fiasco with just trying to get some simple dredging that 4 years ago, if we'd been able to get the permit, we could have had it done by now. All of a sudden this year, eelgrass is, oh my God, it's sacred. And so now we can't dredge this year because of it. I don't know what's going to be sacred in the next permit cycle. If you have any ideas, it might be nice to know ahead of time. And what about all the folks who fish from the breakwater? There's fishing is important, but what I noticed is you didn't outline the San Gregorio Fault, and it's a wide fault. It's got 2 parts. It's moving. And so what struck me was we're doing all this work here. We're going to be losing Seal Cove and the mountain probably before the committee finishes its work. And so it will change things. Are you going to put more you can't put more reefs in the marine protected area that's already slowing down the ocean a little bit here, but clearly not enough. And all the earthquake faults that are up there that keep that moving kind of like jello. I mean, I have friends who live up there, and I know how often the sewer lines and water lines are impacted by faults none of us hear or see. And there are houses falling off the ocean there into the ocean right now. And there are other houses that they continually are repairing them because they have an earthquake fault real close, and they're shifting and dividing and doing interesting geometric things that houses weren't engineered to do. So I think looking at this is a good plan, but I will probably be following this when I'm very, very, very old and find it very curious. But I think my personal opinion is, sure, we can study it to death, but let's leave it alone until we really have a more thorough understanding of the San Andreas Fault and Seal Cove and what the construction of Big Wave is going to be doing just up from that little wetland area. The county, after 18 years, approved this huge development with monster buildings. It's going to change the way water flows into that wetland. So we need to be keeping an eye on it. But yeah, it's not in my lifetime, but it's going to be interesting. I'll tell my children to keep an eye out for when the mountain breaks there at Seal Cove. Thank you.
Commissioner Ratouche.
I'd like to start out by saying I'd be really remiss if I didn't start out by saying One Shoreline's lack of communication and collaboration with the Harbor District left me very puzzled. When I'm reading about One Shoreline making decisions about the Harbor District and they hadn't contacted the Harbor District, I just wondered who got the permission to make these type of decisions. Then we look at the current plan of the Harbor District, or the breakwater as it is. how many decades went into planning that and trying to do the best thing? And now we're saying, well, you know what, after all that work, it's failing. So one thing I think we could really jump on for something positive, have any permits been filed for stream bed alteration, or what would it take to reroute Deer Creek immediately? Because that's such a source of sand. Has that been started? Do we have any permits with anybody or anyone? And where's that on your priority list? This has been mentioned, a harbor of safe refuge. I have to agree with former Commissioner Lorenas. And with the comments by a member of the public, Mr. Massara, we have to think about a harbor of safe refuge for a couple hundred years that California's been around. Why do we build the breakwater in the first place? Storms came in and pushed boats up on the beach. And that's just a natural progression of, I mean, that went on 30 years ago, 35, 40 years ago. So I also have to disagree with the comment. One of our speakers said that the Harbor District needs more collaboration with outside agencies. Apparently that person isn't referring to the general manager's report, because he's meeting with people every single month. And the other thing, I didn't hear a word that California has what's been defined as an emergent seacoast. So we've got one plate sliding over another. And how does that affect what we're talking about here? Or do we just ignore that? Say, well, we're going to work on the smaller issue of sand. The movement of sand is paramount, like Mr. Massara said. The permitting, when can we start issues? Having been a resident of the harbor or used the harbor as my business for 30 years, I know there's massive areas where you just don't take a boat, even at high tide. So what are the plans when we've had some of the pictures that show bulldozers coming in and creating some type of a berm? How about at these ultra low tides, where can we push the sand that would help Princeton? How can we do short-term, less expensive things? I have to agree with Commissioner Slater Carter. I don't think it'll be in my lifetime that I see some type of a redesigned harbor wall like this. However, when I look at crowding the launch ramp in there, I think that you can't put too much stuff in a closed area. We're looking at trying to enlarge slips in the harbor. And how do we account for that? How do we account for another set of docks among these plans? So this is, to me, like cramming too much into too small an area. I have people that have talked to me decades ago about the idea of having a hole or a pipe that theoretically people used to think that sand would flow through. Are we looking at that? And then I did hear someone mention about the fishermen going out. We have a class of people that can't afford a boat. So is there still going to be an opportunity for these people to get out to the end to the best of their ability? They can't afford a boat. They can't afford to go out on boats. They fish from the rocks. They fish from the shore. So that's a little bit, but I've heard our collaboration is starting to improve. That's good. But I look at this and I'm highly skeptical at this point. There's some easy fixes of pushing around the sand, easy fixes of rerouting the creek. And I'll be staying in touch. And when Commissioner Dormerant mentions the committee, he and I are part of the committee.
Okay, thank you. Virginia Ciancarelli, did you wish to make any comments?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the presentation, Lynn. I agree with what my fellow commissioners have said, and actually what one of the members of the public, Mark Massara, said about dredging. I think it's important. It's been an issue even before I think I got on the harbor board, and that's now going on 8 years. So, you know, maybe One Shoreline can help us get the permit finalized to get the dredging done. But I really want to talk about this relationship because I'm actually kind of a little sad that the perception out there is that we are not building the relationship, when in fact we were left out of this discussion from the very beginning. And the fact that we had to have an emergency special meeting last year, at the end of last year, because this pretty much was thrown on us and then it was removed from the One Shoreline agenda, indicates to me that there was no real effort to make a relationship, to form a relationship and build the relationship, cultivate the relationship and nourish it, not just with the Harbor District, but with the entire coastside community. I've heard from a lot of coastside residents that they don't want the outer breakwater removed. They don't, right? And fortunately, I mean, they came last time to talk about this and they weren't here this year or this time, but I've heard from this was on the public agenda. So if you want to have a relationship, which I think is important for us to even look at this, because right now I'm not even sure I want the committee to waste time on this until the board has some idea what we're going to do, because there are real needs now. But the relationship has to be a two-way street. So whoever was, I think it was Kimberly Williams from Surfrider Foundation who made the comment, we're not impeding this. We're getting this thrown at us, and not just at us, but the entire coastside community. So if you want to have the relationship of trust, then let's start there, because right now, as you went through this presentation, I'm not even sure how much of this was received, but how much information was gathered from the Harbor District. Certainly not really worked. Y'all haven't worked with us that much. And we're actually the elected body that has the authority to do this. Well, I'm sorry, Lynn, One Shoreline is not an elected body that can make this decision. We'd like to work with everyone, but we were left out from the very beginning. And in order to have a collaborative relationship, the trust has to be there, and it should have been there from the very beginning. So I'm happy, George, to have some discussion, but we have a lot of things that we're doing in the district right now. So there are going to be trade-offs, right? For us, I would like One Shoreline to help us get the dredging permit, the Coastal Commission. That's what I would like, because the public wants that too. For what this subcommittee wants to do, I don't even know, but whatever it is, this board should decide on that, because I don't want staff to be going on a wild goose chase, looking at all these other things. And we're trying to get tenant row resolved. We're trying to deal with our leases. We're trying to deal with dredging. We're trying to deal with a whole host of things with a pretty limited staff. So the trade-offs are going to have to benefit the Harbor District. That's who we represent. And we represent all of the coastside residents and all of the, actually not even coastside residents. This is a county-wide office. We represent the county in terms of what should happen here. So if you want a collaborative relationship, that trust has to be established first, number one. And so I think, George, if it's up to the commission, we should decide on what y'all should look at, because I'm not going to deal with compromising staff's time when we're on a positive trajectory in making things happen for the Harbor District.
And that's the reason why I laid it as a proposal.
I know.
Because what I'd like to see us do as a team is to vet a lot of these concepts before they get out into the public and the rest of the county gets all upset that we're removing breakwaters.
That's already out there as far as so that to make a motion that we don't remove the breakwater.
That's true. There's a lot of proposals out there, like maybe putting a gap in the breakwater, like diverting the creek, maybe getting the Corps to build some spurs onto the other breakwater that breaks up that reflected wave that Bob was showing. I mean, there's a lot of these things. So a lot of these things got to be vetted
through the commission. Through the commission. That
well, once the team looks at it, then that's presented to the committee. I mean, that's presented to the commission.
What team are you talking about?
I'm just talking about kind of a technical team that we have, Coastal Commission.
I'm talking about a team where the commission directs the committee on what we're looking at, so that we have a shared vision, at least with the commission. Right? I don't even think we have a shared vision with One Shoreline. Lynn, I'm sorry, that is how I feel, because we were left out from the beginning. So there is no shared vision in my mind. And that's what I'm hoping for within our commission, so that we're on the same page. So we have to give direction to the committee, and then the committee does its work and brings it back to the commission, and then direct staff, where we direct staff to do whatever we want to do in collaboration possibly with One Shoreline. I mean, the shared vision has to happen, and I don't see that happening yet. And I'm not even sure if it's going to
That could
happen
be
based
part of
on the
that
track
proposal,
record.
that we build that shared vision first. We build,
Then let's
what are
look
the
at trade-offs.
priorities?
That's right. Let's
What
look
are
at
the priorities? Because there may be higher priority to get something smaller done, like.
what Tom was saying.
What Tom was
Yeah.
saying. There may be some things we can have. We don't know what those are yet.
Right now, we're not included in the shared vision except at the last minute, and that's unacceptable for the district and for the constituents. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to thank One Shoreline for the presentation. I was intrigued by the level of detail of this initial study. And also thanks to the commission for being frank and honest with their thoughts as well. Reflecting on Ms. Giancarelli's comments too, I think there's a lot of things that are driving the priorities of the commission here ahead of this. I mean, this is, even if we went full stream ahead on this, I think you're looking at 15, 20 years down the road before you really get it, based on our experience and how long it's taken us to think about dredging something. And this is obviously a very, very capital intensive project. And I think that it really warrants the commission to focus on the things that we have in hand, the dredging, and see that through and see what information that gives us as to what other solutions might be. You know, bigger solutions might be viable or might be in the realm of possibilities here. So I guess that's my thought. And I guess I'm not adverse to Commissioner, the ad hoc committee of Commissioner Damarant and Mr. Matoush exploring ideas, but I'm a little hesitant to propose a fairly massive effort that's going to involve a host of other agencies at this point in time.
Understood. Maybe a pre-proposal to that proposal would be that the commission work with One Shoreline to build a joint vision, that one vision.
That assumes we want to do that.
Right? Okay.
That assumes that that's the direct, not that we don't.
Well, I mean, if you don't.
I want to hear from staff where we are in the pipeline with all the current priorities, right? With all of the things that we're doing. Sorry, Catherine.
I want to build on what Virginia is saying. One Shoreline has a vision. That's nice. How many other visions are there? I think as Mr. Battaglia was saying, that first you have to know what problem you're solving. And I think the real examination here needs to be, let's look at what what other problems are that could be solved, because there's, for instance, one of the things that I see here with One Shoreline's guiding principles, realign Highway 1. Tell you for a fact, the folks in San Mateo and Redwood City, the explosion from the citizens of El Granada. If that were advertised as, oh, gee, you'd have to have a huge auditorium for people to say, no, you're not realigning Highway 1. We've got too much infrastructure, number one, just inside of Highway 1 on the Burnham Strip. But you've also got folks, because I've brought it up before, and these are the responses I got, was you can't even move the highway in, so it goes on this little peripheral road right outside here. People go, oh no, we don't want all that traffic inside El Granada. The highway was designed for that traffic, not us. So maybe raising Highway 1, but then you've got a historic town designed by Daniel Burnham, and they're very protective of their views. The Community Services District just spent a whole lot of money buying the Burnham Strip to keep apartments from going in there, and from that view being destroyed. So the kind of uproar that you would have I would shelter in place in Montera behind the mountain. It's just it's a serious issue. So I think before we start looking at what One Shoreline's guiding principles are, you ask the community, what are your guiding principles?
Well, certainly the Harbor District was never asked to be included in understanding what the guiding principles are, yet we're being asked to change the configuration of our entire harbor.
Yeah, sorry.
So there's been a lot of representations of One Shoreline in the last 15 minutes. And there it is.
I can understand if it was my feet at size 14.
So there's been a lot of representations, and I think the comments that were just made about the highway are a good starting point to respond. If you recall from the slide that Bob Battaglio spoke to, it talked about armoring or realigning the highway. Okay. It's not a one shoreline position. The highway has to be moved. This is a study to begin a conversation. It's not saying One Shoreline is making a policy statement, the highway must be moved to disrupt the community. That's not what has been said. That's not what's been alluded to. What we're saying is that if we don't do something, as you saw from the picture in one of the earliest slides, that highway will not function. That's our point. If the highway is not armored to the teeth, much more so than we've seen in the last few years, or if the highway is not raised, as the commissioner had said, or the highway is not moved, it will not function as a highway. So let's just get real about what the long-term problem is that we're facing, not just for the highway, for Princeton, for the harbor, for Murata Road, for the beaches, for the ecological assets. That's what we're trying to do. We're not saying it's a One Shoreline vision. We're saying it's a study to have a serious, thoughtful conversation about the future. I support the dredging. One Shoreline supports the dredging. It's not about One Shoreline being against dredging. We think, and as somebody said, we think that the results of the dredging project could help inform where the sand actually moves. And that will be good for people who study this issue, that know about sand transport. They'll be interested to know what the result of the dredging is. And the dredging will solve a short-term issue for the harbor, and we support it. So it's not about One Shoreline kind of imposing itself. It's about starting a serious conversation about the long-term impacts that none of us can deny. And if the agencies that are involved, not just the harbor, the county, the feds, the state, the city, the community services district, if the status quo is proceeded with, that we all focus on our assets, we're never going to solve the problem. It's not going to happen. Those breakwaters cannot be built high enough in the future to solve the problem and think about the effects that they'll have on all the other assets. Or the highway cannot be, cannot be left in place and still function as a highway. So we don't have to move forward with this. I don't have any comment on the Harbor District's priorities, how this fits in with their other priorities. We do not have to move forward on this, but it's important we start thinking about it and start taking a serious look at what's the long term on this harbor, not the next 10 years, not the next 5 years. Dredging would be fine. It's taking a look at what's this place going to look like in 50 years. And can we just start taking, because these projects take so long, as was discussed with the dredging, and how long it's taken to get a permit. I've gotten permits from the agencies. I know it takes years. I know it's very hard. The question is, when do we get started on understanding and doing something about our long-term vulnerability that we all share, the community, the harbor, everybody. So, thanks for the opportunity, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Slater Carter, did you?
I'm trying to look up real quick. And you said that this breakwater couldn't be raised high enough to accommodate sea level rise. What are you talking about in terms of sea level rise? Because I've read 6 inches or a foot, and I tell you what, there's going to be a whole lot of other problems that will diminish this breakwater if we get up to 3 or 4 feet.
I agree with that statement completely.
So what were you using as your baseline for saying we need this change in in the breakwaters, and how high are you
I'm not
talking
saying-
about making these?
I'm not saying we need that change. I'm saying, going back to my first slide or my first sentence, we've asked what we know to be the smartest people in the room, not, I mean, metaphorically, the room, the area, to look at what are the vulnerabilities and what are ideas on how to address those vulnerabilities. And it's, you know, there's no specific change that taken alone would address all the vulnerabilities we face. It's not just about the breakwaters because there are too many assets. They're all interrelated.
Can I address the technical question about the breakwater?
Because I'm looking at a KQAD map here for 2050 sea level rise, and there's no damage shown on the ocean side, whereas Foster City and Redwood City and the airport have, the San Francisco airport and other places along the bay are shown as being highly disturbed, but it's badly captioned. I'd like to see it for the coast.
So regarding the breakwaters could be upgraded for sea level rise. The amount of sea level rise we looked at was, I can't remember if it's 6 to 7 feet. You know, this is a conceptual study, but that's the medium high risk aversion scenario put forth by the state of California. And that amount corresponds to the year 2100. So we didn't, that's like one of the state guidance benchmarks, if you will. There's others. You can pick different years. You can take a low risk aversion, which means you're willing to take more risk and have a lower number. But so that's what a lot of people are using for adaptation planning. We didn't make that up. At that level, you would need to upgrade the existing breakwaters. Otherwise, waves would be coming over the breakwaters, and they already kind of splash over now. So the point is not that you can't do that. I mean, certainly that would be the logical thing to do. And that's what we would expect you would do if there weren't these other problems that everybody was collectively trying to solve. And, but if you look at that upgrade to your breakwaters, there's a big cost. And there's a lot of permits, probably easier because it's an existing structure. That would probably be easier, but there's still a lot of costs. So comparing the future at 2100 with the existing is not necessarily a fair comparison. You have to look at the future conditions for the different alternatives. And that's the process that you would go through if you went through the local coastal planning process. And then everybody would be involved and there'd be a lot of arguments, but then you would have the answers as to, you know, how much more it would cost, how much more effective it would be to the extent that that's. But I just wanted to, did I address your technical question about that? I mean, you can keep the breakwaters where they are and upgrade them for 6 to 7 feet of sea level rise. I think you can do that. I mean, that's physically, engineeringly possible.
Yeah, one more layer.
Don't worry.
I'm glad to hear that.
One layer of rock will get you to 2090, one layer, because, you know, one rock is about 4 to 6 feet dimensionally. So
I think
you
that
go layer on there and you're good. So that's, you know, that's easy to do. So that's
a lot more sense.
well, yeah.
Makes sense for the breakwater. Right? And that's
The challenge is, yeah, the rest of the system. And if you look at where we were 15 years ago when we first started getting into this, and even further, the reason we got into this is because the harbor has sediments that it needed to dispose of. And it was clean sediment, and it made so much sense to just put it on the other side of the breakwater. We got stopped. We, you know, the county, all of us got stopped by the Marine Sanctuary. They said no. As soon as man picks up that sand in its own little hands, it's called spoil. Okay. So it's not that it's contaminated. That's a different issue. This was clean. They knew it was clean. This is now called spoil because man picked it up, and they don't want man to put spoil material on those beaches. Well, they've changed that ruling, and it was about 10 years ago they then agreed, okay, well, let's do a demonstration. Okay, so the true challenge of what it is how do we get rid of the sediment? Because if you can't get rid of it there, you're going to pay big bucks to take it inland somewhere. And so that was kind of that whole battle. Then it came, we wanted to put it on the beach. Then that whole situation, well, why do you want to put it on the beach? That beach is eroding 4 times faster. And it's in the Army Corps of Engineers Section 111 report. You look into the engineering appendix and they did four sample sites of that long-term erosion at all those 4 beaches. And they had Miramar and down further, and they even said 3 to 4 times more at that site right at Surfers Beach because of the reflected wave from the breakwater. So that's kind of like, that's like an immediate problem. I mean, if you want us to help, we could put sand there, but we also have to look at the problem of the continual erosion that breakwater is causing. There's a lot of other things you can do, but those are kind of, you can prioritize those things. The challenge is to get, we talk amongst ourselves and then we can go on the phone and talk about, but what I'm trying to get is everybody together who then has a piece of that pie and sit down and have Caltrans sit there and say what they will or won't do and work with us. The same thing with Coastal Commission and the Marine Sanctuary. When I find when you get them around that table and say, look, we got some, high priority problems going on. That highway is going to get eroded probably next year if we have another year like this. You already lost a big chunk of the trail. So what are we going to do about that? Going back, it just seems like, if we bring everybody together in the short term, help develop what that vision is. There's a big vision picture, but then there's some pieces on that we need to solve right away. And I think we can get that from a group like that and pretty quick, and then solve the more, the high pressing problems we need to solve right now.
Well, I think we've had a very good discussion here. It's
Tom had his hand.
Yeah, there was a comment made earlier that our launch ramp is closed, and that's not true. It's just operating at slightly reduced capacity, and we intend to work on that, bump it up a little bit. But in addition to what Commissioner Chang-Karali said, if there's anything that One Shoreline can do to assist in permitting, we'd appreciate that assistance.
For dredging.
Yeah, for the dredging. I mean, it's ridiculous that the sanctuary and the Coastal Commission knows Santa Cruz and other locations have been pumping over the seawall for a long time. And how we've been blocked for decades from this is astounding. I just can't figure this out at all. Who keeps throwing these roadblocks in our way? And what can we do to say, why can they do it? Why can't these guys do it? What are you doing to help these people do it? That's going to help your road issues. It's going to help a whole lot of issues. We're being blocked on a number of ways just consistently. If the Harbor Commission here wants to take care of the problem, it's the permitting. Talk to Mr. Marin and Mr. Pruitt. It's the permitting that's holding this whole thing up.
Okay, so I have one last comment about, so I agree with Tom about the permitting. If there's any way One Shoreline can help, it would be a great service, not to just the Harbor District, but for the entire coast side. That would actually go a long way with me in terms of developing the relationship, which I think badly needs to be developed and quite frankly repaired. So I think that would help. We're in a vicious cycle for dredging because of the eelgrass situation. And well, I mean, it's like, we didn't dredge, so we have the eelgrass. Now we have the eelgrass, so we can't dredge. So it's like this vicious cycle that just cannot seem to be broken. While up and down the California coast, dredging has been happening. President Zimke and I went to, and with General Manager Pruitt, we went to Washington, D.C. for the CMAQ conference. And CMAQ, I don't know if y'all know what that is, but it's, what is it? California Maritime Assets and Navigation Commission, something like that, CMAN. Assets and Navigation.
In navigation.
Marine.
CMANC.
CMANC. Anyway, they represent all the harbors and the ports, members in the entire state. And it seemed like we were the ones, really one of the main ones that just Pillow Point Harbor can't even get this dredge thing done. So for me, if y'all can help, because I think we really want to talk about a systemic effort and collaboration, this is going to really benefit everybody. And that would go a long way, I think, in developing the relationship with One Shoreline. Thank you.
Okay. To kind of bring this to a close, I guess, number one, thank you for being here and listening to our level of frustration. Hopefully that's been useful to you as much as it has for us. To get to Commissioner Damarant's suggestion, I'd kind of like to leave that to the committee if they would would care to pursue that. And obviously, one thing that's a concern to me is if we get a big group together, what's that going to mean for our staff time? You know,
Exactly.
we're already fully committed to doing everything we can to our priorities. And I'm reluctant to try and suggest we expand beyond our.
That's an important
capabilities.
discussion. We can discuss that first before we decide to go further. What's it going to take to do that? Okay.
See, just so we know how big a piece of pie
We're trying to grab.
we're
Yeah.
trying to grab.
We're going to be making.
Yeah, and the commitment of time and energy. So on that, I think we've worn ourselves out on comments. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Bob.
Giving us a chance to talk. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Lynn.
Okay, moving along. Item number 3, initiate proceedings to adopt an increase in the district's rates and fees effective July 1st, 2023. Julie, this is yours.
Good afternoon again. This is the preliminary step in order to talk about if or by how much we want to increase our rates and fee schedules. The fee schedules that are attached to the staff report, it's a recommended 5.6% increase. That's equal to the increase in the CPI for the Bay Area for calendar year 2022. The next steps of this discussion item is that we would hold a public meeting that would be advertised to adopt a resolution that will formally approve these presented rate increases. The amount of money that is expected to be added to the budget, the final budget that will be presented in June, is $164,000 if the Harbor Commission approves these increases. And so I guess I'll turn that over to the commission at this point if you have any questions on any particular increases on any of the schedules.
No hands raised. Okay, I'd bring it to the commission for comments from the commission. Commissioner Matoush.
Scribner's note, I found an error in one of the rates on page 1, Silver Point Harbor, rates and fees schedule, and I thought that was corrected, but my current notes right here has it still, the 55-foot level is incorrect.
Right, that should be $637.
It's corrected on the online version.
All right, perfect.
Okay. Any other comments? Commissioner Chang.
So I can understand why we want to increase rates and fees, but I have gotten a couple of calls, not from any of our tenants or, fishing, none of the fish buyers, but from someone who has an interest in the fishing industry, talking about the complete lack of the salmon season this year and the financial burdens that's going to place and on the entire commercial fishing industry, right? And I don't know, I mean, I'm not sure what to do. I mean, this is clearly a discussion for the commission, but, a couple of people have said, oh, well, is there any way to defer these payments? And so I'm just a little concerned that this is what our tenants are feeling out there and what they're seeing, and that there's going to be a financial burden versus our need to bring in revenue. I understand that, but I just, have you heard from from anybody? Because I have from a couple of people, and no one within Pillar Point Harbor. These are people outside of, but like I said, who have an interest in the fishing industry.
I've heard from a few fishermen that they would like their berth rents cut in half because of the seasons being canceled. I've also heard from fishermen that they want the ability to sell off the boat, not just catches that they personally catch, but other catches or other fish that they purchase somewhere else and to sell off their boat to be a source of income for them. Right now, I would say that the berthing fees that we charge are reflective of the cost that we incur in maintaining those slips. So reducing the slip fees would have a financial impact on us, and not a small one, especially for Pillar Point Harbor, and affect our, again, it negatively affects our ability to do the capital improvement programs that we want to do. So it's a balance between the two, and then we also have to avoid, and Trish can correct me or not, but the appearance of providing free services basically
or defer
for government resources.
No, and so that, I mean, there's so many ways to look at that. That actually isn't necessarily favorable for the Harbor District, and we are here to protect the Harbor District, but I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there to see what you've heard. I mean, maybe what we need to do is this study session or whatever, this public meeting that Julie had suggested, just to get this kind of input. I mean, you know, like I said, I've only heard from a couple of people and you're hearing from some people. So but you know, between the two of us, it's like a handful.
The request is definitely out there from a few of the fishermen, and I'm sure all the fishermen would agree. And we have been looking into what other harbors are doing up and down the coast. Some are giving a discount, some are not. So it's a mixed bag. If the board is interested, we can put together a staff report for the next board meeting before these fees get implemented that outlines the impact if we do some kind of reduction in fee, and let you consider it at that time.
I just want us to be sensitive to what we're hearing. I mean, this is a local economic development piece too. Sorry, George. Sorry. I'm getting it from both sides.
I was going to ask.
I was just telling George he could go before me.
I was kind of thinking the same thing, but I'd like to see, you know, what analysis we could look at if you reduce the rates, if you increase the rates, but what if we left them the same for a short period of time or for a half a year or a year? Does that buy us anything in the short term to give a little bit relief? You know, we're not going to cut them in half. I'm saying we don't cut them at all, but maybe we don't raise them right now to give them another year. I don't know what the impacts are, so that may be a report that would look at those three and what the impacts are.
And again, this is getting beyond the rates discussion, but if the board's interested in getting a staff report on those impacts, we can put that together for you for the next meeting.
I agree that report would be useful. I can also give you my personal experience, having been on a rate making board. About 20 years ago, we were in a tight position, and so we didn't raise our trash rates for about 5 years, so they were flat. And then all of a sudden, inflation and everything else caught up with us, and we had to go like this. If you raise your rates incrementally, it's easier for your ratepayers. And it also gives you a big delta in that triangle of the money you need to operate so you don't get stressed. We also did it with our water rates during the last financial setbacks. And this year, and many you'll notice all the water districts, their rates are going like this. It's not only because of the drought, it's because they haven't been adequately raising their rates to cover their costs. And as a sideline, the regulatory agencies, again, this is for water districts, we're saying, oh, you've got to get people to cut back on using water. So make the predominance of your rates come from water usage. Well, people are really smart. They reduced their usage. So our incomes went down, and I'm talking about water districts all over the state. So, but our employee costs are going up, our materials costs are going up, all of those other costs, and our ratepayers are ratcheting down their water use And so now a lot of districts are in a fair amount of trouble, and Marin just is looking at like a 20% increase. I really think we need to be more considerate of our ratepayers and keep the service levels up and find ways for them to make more money if we can, rather than keeping our rates flat and having the harbor deteriorate so that they have less opportunity. And then when the fix-up bill comes, it's huge.
We said we had a public comment?
Yes.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
Diana. Go ahead, Diana. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize the mute was on. Yes, I am part of the fishing community, and I wanted to weigh in on that. And we don't mind paying a small increase if it helps, keep the harbor going and all of that. But my question is, where are you getting your 5.6%? The current rate of inflation for the past 12 months is a 4.9. So I'm wondering where you come up with the number, and if it would be possible to maybe up it a 2.5% or a 2% rather than such a 5% jump. And I also had a question. I know you tabled the issue of the insurance that you're going to try and require. When are you tabling that too? I didn't understand when that was going to be discussed. So I just wanted to know when I could weigh in on that. Hello?
Yes.
Answer that.
Oh, Jim, do you have a response?
I don't have any specific date of when that would be coming back to the board, but
okay.
I don't anticipate it coming back before July or August.
Okay, because we have a homemade boat, and if you've ever tried to get insurance on a homemade boat, it doesn't exist. And we can't pay $15,000, $20,000 a year for insurance. It would put us out of business. So I guess I'll bring it up when it's the appropriate time, but in its extreme concern, we're not the only people that have a homemade boat. So there's got to be something, that can help us.
And if you can email me your contact information, I'll keep you in the loop.
Okay, who said that? I couldn't hear who said it.
This is Jim Pruitt, the general manager.
Oh, Jim Pruitt. Okay, yes, I will email you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to answer the question about where we got the 5.6% in the staff report, if you click on the link, it takes you directly to the published CPI, and it has a table for the Bay Area that shows the 5.6% over the calendar year of 2022. So that doesn't take into consideration the last 5 months.
Okay.
Any other comments from the commission? Okay, what's your pleasure as far as, would you like to have the staff look at impacts of this rate and come back to us?
My idea is just, it says initiate proceedings to adopt an increase.
Right.
And let's, I think that this is an information step one. We've got to do the publishing and everything else. So I say proceed.
Okay.
Proceed and,
Which,
would you include another staff report on the impact?
I'm not for it.
I think you can separate the two. This is proceeding with the rate increase based on the CPI issues that Julie just described, which we need to proceed with so that our budget process continues.
I would agree with that.
The final version of this may be different,
Yeah.
or how we implement this may be different based on the report that I provide next month.
Okay, I'm fine
all
with
right,
that.
become a dual
Yeah,
path. Okay.
but it's coming, your report's going to be coming back to us in June, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Julie's report.
Oh, so, so then you probably need a motion, right? To adopt, to initiate proceedings to increase rates and fees to reflect an increase of 5.6% and direct staff to notice a public meeting to consider adopting the increase to be held at the next regularly scheduled Harbor Commission meeting on June 23rd.
First.
21st.
June 21st, 2023, sorry. So I'll make that motion based on exactly what we just agreed on, Jim. We need a second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, George, second. Any further discussion? Okay, can we get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Slater Carter,
Yes.
Commissioner Dumrat,
Yes.
President Zemke,
Yes.
Commissioner Fuchs,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang Crowley.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you all. We are skipping number 4 and going to item number 5, bad debt write-off request.
Thank you, President Zemke, commissioners. This item would authorize the general manager to write off as bad debt a total of $309,896.71 in accounts receivable for $101,523.71 for Oyster Point and $208,273
Or slip rentals.
Pillar Point. That sounds like a lot of money, so I'm going to describe our process a little bit and give you some reasons why this is higher than normal. So at the end of every fiscal year, staff does a journal entry to increase our allowance for bad debts. And so we record an expense at the end of every fiscal year that has no cash impact, but sets aside resources for uncollectible receivables. We've done that for all of these accounts that you are approving to write off. The other thing that we do is we say, okay, do we have a boat in the harbor? And if we have a boat, we can put a lien on that boat, assuming that it's undocumented, and we can try to sell that boat to get some of the money that is owed to us. The people on this list have no boat in the harbor. We tried to collect from them without success, and we've transferred these balances to our a company that tries to get collections on our behalf. In the past, we've allowed these accounts to stay on our books a little bit longer, but now we're implementing a new process where once we say we can't collect these accounts, we need help from an outside party, which we have, then at that point, we will bring to the Harbor Commission a recommendation that that account be written off. If the receivable company is successful, they will provide a portion of that money back to us, and we will have, additional revenue at that point. Our collection from the third-party company is not very much. So, and Boomer is in the audience right now, so he has a little bit more detail if you have any questions in the detail of that. So 3 things have happened this year. One is that we've changed our procedures to write off these balances sooner than we would have before. Number 2 is that we tabled a lot of our collection efforts because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there was a lot of protections, especially for those who are liveaboards. And number 3, we were very much involved in implementing ERP system, which would help us with these collections in the future. So something that used to take staff, days to prepare letters, now is an automated report, and we run a process. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, okay, all right. So that is why these amounts are bigger than the last time we wrote off balances, which was in, I believe, March of 2001. So if you have any other questions or want any detail on the specific list of people, we're here to answer any of those questions.
Okay, do we have any public comment? Any hands raised?
No public comment.
Do we have any comments from the commission? Sounds like this is money that's already gone anyway, so.
Is that an accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. Yes, we've already set aside that money as uncollectible in a balance sheet account.
So just over our history, what percentage return do we get when we go in collection on someone? I mean, do we get 20% back? Do we get anything back? I mean, you were saying that there's very little that we get back, so.
Right. Boomer,
Does
do
it
you
cost
have
us
that
more?
number?
There you go. You're reading my mind. Stop. But go ahead, finish my mind. Yeah, it costs us more to go to do that than it's worth. So, yeah.
I believe they take 30 to 35%. This is our collections vendor.
Yeah, so if they're successful, if the collection company is successful in getting money, then they get to keep some of that money. Otherwise, we don't pay them. So it doesn't cost us anything. It just gives us somebody extra trying to get the money from these people.
Hey, Tom, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make the motion to authorize the general manager to write off as bad debt a total of $309,896.71 in accounts receivable. And that breaks down as $101,523.71 from Oyster Point Marina and $208,373 from Pillar Point Harbor.
Second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we ought to make this authorization. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Donrot,
Yes.
President Zemke,
Yes.
Commissioner Mathush,
Yes.
Commissioner Jean Crowley,
Aye.
Commissioner Slater Park.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. We're going to move now to item number 6 of the consent calendar, Pillar Point Harbor Retail Center ADA Restaurant Project Construction Cost Increase.
Okay, so that's that item 3, but I pulled that. Sorry.
Yeah, and I agree.
Sorry, I pulled that because Jim, thanks for putting this, thanks for doing the staff report, but I was wondering, here it is. The settlement agreement that Tom and I negotiated, I think it was back in 2017, Tom, I don't even remember, somewhere.
2019.
Yeah, right before the pandemic. Included, I think, some kind of cost sharing from the tenant for this. So, and I could be wrong. I mean, I didn't think that the entire background was written in here, not that it needed to be, but given that we're dealing with tenant row right now, I think it probably should have been in here, but that's just my opinion. Because we have Catherine and George, and actually Bill to a certain extent, who didn't even really, don't know the information on the full settlement agreement and what our commitments are and obligations are and what the tenant's commitment and obligations are. So can you just go over that, just mainly for our education for the 3 new board members, since this happened before Bill even got on the board?
There's a lawsuit brought forward against the district for ADA requirements. And we were, some of our stuff needed improvements, or some of our facilities needed improvements. And we agreed to take those actions. One of those was to replace the restrooms at Catch Joanne Restaurant and Harbor Bar and make them ADA, which that's the process. That's what we're doing right now, is building 2 brand new ADA compliant bathrooms out behind Tenant Row. And those bathrooms will be ready within the next month, I think, or so. And then they also required the tenant to pay the district $1,000 a month for 13 months, which they have. And they're also requiring the tenant to make those ADA improvements within the building shell. So the tenant's doing that now and making those ADA improvements for the interior. But we agreed to build the bathrooms. We didn't agree to where we would build the bathrooms, but we built them outside the restaurant so that, and independent of the restaurant, so that if at any time we wanted to replace that restaurant, building, or remove that building, those restrooms can be converted to standalone restrooms in a parking lot, or they can be integrated to any new building that we build. So we're not just throwing away the cost of those restrooms. We're going to utilize them into the future, regardless of what the district chooses to do. So we are in compliance with that part of the agreement. We've got several extensions. Our current extension expires December 31st, 2023 to finish this project, and we'll have it finished by that without a problem. But we are staying within the cost sharing parameters.
Yeah, I just mainly wanted y'all to understand that. And yeah, I don't know, I'm just hearing, because there's so much going on there that, you know, the harbor district's being blamed for, you know, they're not, Catch not being open, which is completely false. So it's just, I don't know, anyway.
The timing of the construction, which we worked with the tenants to maximize their profits before closing or building the restroom, delayed the project until October 31st, when we started. But then with this rainy season this year, it has had a significant impact on the project and delayed it. So now it's nice and sunny. The project is moving ahead very quickly. We were surprised by, once we started digging, by finding unmarked gas lines and unmarked other utility lines and pipes that we had to work around.
I'd like to add the comment that every time Jim uses the word delay, add in parents cost increases. The way prices have been going up recently, everyone, I was talking to a contractor yesterday, said, I don't know how anybody can even afford to build a house. Prices are going up so fast. So any delay is additional cost.
Okay.
So move.
So what's the recommendation for?
Well, so to approve an increase, I'll move to approve an increase of $130,000 to the Evra construction contract for the Pillow Point Retail Center ADA restroom project due to unforeseen construction challenges not in the original project scope, bringing the new construction project to cost $879,800, and to authorize the general manager to approve potential change orders for up to an additional 10% to cover any yet unforeseen additional costs, making new approved project total $967,780 should it be needed, and to approve an increase in the capital expenditure appropriations in this, and I'm assuming this amount, Jim, is 967,000, right? 780 to be funded by available working capital.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we make this recommendation. All in favor, let's do a roll call, yes.
President Zemke,
Yes.
Commissioner Mateusz,
Aye.
Commissioner Shane Crowley.
Aye.
Commissioner Slater Carter.
Yes.
Commissioner Summer.
Aye.
Okay, that concludes the regular agenda items. We will now break for close.
Zemke,
Yes.
did you call for public comment on this?
Oh, no, are there any public comments on item number 6? So I guess I skipped right over that. Sorry about that. I guess we can go into closed session at this time, and we will be back to adjourn the meeting.
Catherine, come sit down.
Go ahead.
Okay, we're going to reconvene the regular meeting at this time, and we need to extend the length of this meeting due to continued discussions in the closed session. So can I have a motion to extend the meeting to 6 o'clock?
Moved. I'll second.
We have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Mathush,
Aye.
Commissioner Chang Carlli,
Aye.
Commissioner Slater Carter,
Yes.
Commissioner Domrat,
Aye.
President Zemke.
Aye. Okay, we will now,
Session.
Public comment on extending the meeting at all?
is there anybody out there?
There's no.
Okay, there's nobody out there. Okay, we will close this and go into back into closed session.
Closed session.
Takes a minute.
Okay, we have finished our closed session. There are no reportable items. We did receive an update from the city or the general manager. And I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Moved. Second.
We have moved and seconded that we adjourn. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Domrat,
Aye.
Commissioner Mathush,
Aye.
President Zemke,
Aye.
Commissioner Chang Carlli,
Aye.
Commissioner Slater Carter.
I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It passes.